These battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody wrong. When people speak with their mind, getting so much resistance from behind. We got to stop the children. What's that sound? Everybody look, it's going down.
Hello, everyone. This is Lauren Steiner, and welcome to The Robust Opposition. I wanted to just open by saying that this is a miraculous thing that these people have been able to do. There are going to be over 50 marches next Saturday, and this was organized completely organically, decentralized, with no institutional support. Organizations who have said this ought to be done have not stepped forward and done this, and these people have. So with no further ado, I want to introduce my panelists. And we have, first of all, Betty Faye Dumas Toto, because Bernie calls her Faye, so she's adopted that in her name. And Betty is a longtime Medicare For All organizer. We met in 2017. I think the first time we met was at Brad Sherman's town hall, when we were both there to try to get him to co-sponsor John Conyers' Medicare For All bill.
That's right.
And then you were a Bernie staffer in 2020. Joy Bunting, also from the Bernie campaign. Oh, I should say Betty's organizing the Los Angeles March. Joy Bunting is the lead organizer for the Chicago March, and I know her from the Bernie campaign, as well as some controversy regarding Force the Vote, which we will be talking about. Laura Fielding is a new friend of mine. We met on Twitter, actually in a Twitter fight, that by the end of the 2 hours, we were good friends, and I had invited her on the show. So we can talk about how that worked out. And I would say that that would be a lesson for Jimmy and Jank and Kyle for them to follow our example. And finally, last but not least, is Sharif Snuggs from New York City, who had the idea to come up with this march and has been one of the driving forces behind it. So first, before we talk about, Sharif, how you came up with the idea and what you did to get it off the ground, I'd like to have everybody talk about their personal story with why Medicare for All is so important to them. And we'll start with you, Betty.
The lack of the ability to get or afford health care has been an issue even since I was, a teenager. And then further into my adult life, as my husband and I are freelance in the film industry. And so we don't have insurance. We have to pay for our own insurance, and we always have had to do that. And in visiting other countries, we realize what the heck, this is ridiculous that we are left vulnerable. And I think the first story, I'm gonna try to time myself here. The first story is when I was young. I was a teenager. My parents were working. I wasn't feeling good, and my brother took me to the emergency room, and I got back home, and I could see like my dad was trying to be very concerned for me, but at the same time I could see like stressors on his face, and he finally like kind of just said, "Did you really need to go to the emergency room?" And I was like, I was like a teenager, my brother thought something was wrong with me. I thought something was wrong with me, but that's how this system has made us devolve, into these like, almost like that's what we think about, instead of the well-being of people. And I felt bad for my dad because he was definitely very anxious and conflicted. Later on, I recall when my husband and my daughter got extreme flu, and I don't know, for some reason mothers have like superpowers, and they're the ones that stay well until everybody gets better, and then you collapse. Well, for some reason they got a bad flu, and we didn't have insurance at the time. Caught without insurance. And I went to we went to an urgent care, and they prescribed my husband some some medication. And when I went to the pharmacy, it was a couple $100s, and I couldn't afford it, and, other people might not know this, and it's ridiculous because you shouldn't have to know this, but I went back to the urgent care and I basically had to beg the doctor for samples. I was just like, she's telling me my husband is extremely, extremely sick, and he's really, really sick, like scaring me, like almost, scaring me so much. And then I'm like, okay, well, I know that you have samples back there, something you could give me because I can't afford this. And she had samples. Not every doctor's going to have the samples of that same medicine that you need. And I happened to get that, but that's what I had to go through. So I know that there are so many other stories out there that are probably way, way worse than mine. But this is the thing that Americans have normalized and take on the cuff when they should not. This is not normal. This is not normal for human beings to treat each other this way. So that's why I got involved. It cost me a lot of money to keep my health insurance. It puts me at an economic risk. I am at an economic risk as I get older and as we will have to retire because I've had to pay huge bills.
Yeah, and I also want to say that Betty is the co-chair of Healthcare for All Los Angeles and very involved in the Campaign for Healthy California, which is right now working on California's second single payer bill. I was involved with, actually, this is the third one. I'm sorry. I was involved with the first one in 2004, the second one in 2017, and this is now the third one here in 2021. Yes.
And that's AB 1400, the CalCare bill, which is the California Guaranteed Healthcare for All Act, in which the march in Los Angeles is going to have a dual focus on the March for Medicare for All on a national level, and also to help promote and elevate AB 1400 CalCare.
Okay, so now I want to go to Joy Bunton. Tell us why Medicare for All is so important to you.
Well, Medicare for All has always been important to me, just like a lot of the other progressive or universal programs, because it's just not fair that everyone isn't able to take advantage of what's out there, that everyone isn't able to get the good care they need, and same with education and all that. And so also when my dad was sick, I always want to cry when I talk about my dad. He died, but when he had his heart attack and his health later deteriorated, and he got like cousin of Parkinson's and dementia and stuff, and fortunately he has a pension in Medicare, and my mom has a pension and Social Security, and so these things were crucial, in which they didn't have to come to any of their 5 kids. I'm the youngest of 5 to help, because I couldn't afford to help anyway. But these are things that I'm not going to be seeing probably for myself in terms of a pension, but you have to wait till I get old enough to get Medicare, and then I have my own health problems. And for the longest time when I was working, I would always opt for the most expensive health insurance coverage, because I have this polymyositis. It's a rare neuromuscular autoimmune disease. It affects my proximal muscles. And when I discovered I had that, then I had to take off work, and I had to get physical therapy and these medications and all, and have to worry about trying to schedule it so I can still keep my job. And then I finally ended up losing a job, and I couldn't afford the freaking Cobra. It's too freaking expensive. And then I couldn't qualify for Medicaid, because when you're on, unemployment, I don't know how they do that math. They need to fix that math, because according to them, you're not poor enough. So you can't get the Medicaid, and I couldn't afford the immunosuppressants that I'm also on, because even generic, they're just ridiculously expensive. And so my health just went worse and worse. And it wasn't until I finally ran out of the unemployment, then I could qualify for Medicaid. And thank God, fortunately, my my specialist, because I have to see a specialist, takes Medicaid, which is, very rare. And I knew that there's so many people that aren't able to see a specialist, with their Medicaid, and they're just out of luck. And it's just wrong. And I always felt that Medicare for All, expanded, improved, just makes sense, especially with these other countries that have it already.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, it's absolutely insane that we don't have Medicare for All, and people have to go through these things, and they have to bankrupt themselves, and people can't get married, or people have to get married, or people have to stay in jobs. And even people with insurance, the vast majority of medical bankruptcies are for people that actually have insurance. So let's go to you next, Laura. Why is Medicare for All so important to you?
I guess the seeds were planted when my husband and I lived over in, we were stationed, he was stationed at RAF Lakenheath. I did some active duty myself in the Air Force, and then he was in for 21 years. And while we lived over there for about 7.5 years, and I was going to biodynamic massage and cranial school, I had a lot of teachers and colleagues, student colleagues who worked within the NHS who asked me, how can you stand to serve a country that leaves so many people behind? And that really hit me like a ton of bricks, because I just really wasn't aware of the cruelties of our system, not only our healthcare system, but the military industrial complex and all of that stuff. So it really kind of like hit home as a point of shame, because they told me that how many horror stories that they had heard about. So that kind of stayed with me. And then it was when years later, during Bernie's first campaign, I wasn't involved on social media, and I wasn't really paying attention to corporate media, but I had heard, Bernie's message and his platform. And so I voted for him in the primary. And then after the imagery of the Pussy Hats, the Women's March all across, the United States, I knit some for those. I sent some to DC with some of the crafting stores or one crafting shop where we could turn our work in, asked us to label, like, when women receive these, what would you like them to march for? They would, so that we can tell them what issue is important to the crafter. And I put Medicare for All. So, it was like the imagery of all those pink hats that I started, like, the months following that first march. It was like I was listening to a YouTube, like an older YouTube video of Bernie and Jane and Roseanne DeMoro speak to the national nurses. And all of a sudden I just started thinking, wow, I'm a knitter. Why don't I start just posting online, like, let's knit for nurses in the 99%. And so that was it. So really, when I heard about these marches, it was kind of like it had come full circle, and the very thing that had inspired me to start crafting these is coming true, because that's really what I had envisioned or wished that I could have. But my goodness, how does what I found out really early on posting all of that was like, people don't want to kind of they love the idea, but when I would ask, when should we march? What would be a good day that everybody wants to march? And does anybody know somebody with some organizing experience? Because I wasn't plugged in at the time, but it was a nurse named Catherine Lewandowski who messaged me and said, I'm a nurse, I'm for Medicare for All. This is such a neat idea. I'd like to come down and hear more about it. And she did. And she said, have you heard about Whole Washington? And I said, nope, I'm not connected up to any organizers. I just know that I was kind of called to action by Bernie Sanders' campaign. And so she connected me up to my local organizers. But the original vision of Red Berets was like crafting, bold and beautiful, kind of a fabric of solidarity for national improved Medicare for All. And I can't imagine, I just feel like, gosh, how horrible is it for us to expect our veterans and active duty members to serve and sacrifice. And some of these things, like, you know, I've learned so much over the last couple of years, and I don't agree at all with the huge wasted military industrial complex budget. Like, we need to allocate that to healthcare and other good things. But to know the very people that are sacrificing also can't, like, go around with the knowledge that they've served a country that doesn't allow up to 68,000 people every year, somewhere between 30 and 68,000 people to die. That's pretty much a terrible travesty. So I like to link those two issues. So.
Well, and also I want to mention that you are on the board of Whole Washington, and Whole Washington is the campaign, just like California has a single payer bill. You guys have a single payer bill as well. Now,
an initiative right now. Yes, we did have a bill, and now what we currently have going up at the Seattle March, and all the way through December is gathering. We need 400,000 signatures for I-1362. So yes, that is also an effort that our local Seattle March will be working on during our event.
Okay, great. Now, Sharif, I would like to ask you if you have a personal story relating to healthcare, your healthcare, or anyone in your family, and then you could segue into how you got the idea to do this march and what was the first thing you did to get it off the ground.
Yeah, I don't have any personal horror stories with myself. Thank God that I'm relatively healthy. I do have health insurance. I take care of both my boys. The only, I guess, horror story would be is like most Americans, I have to spend so much money for health insurance, and so I don't have any money put away for any safety net. Like most Americans, if an extreme emergency does happen, I'm screwed. All I have is basically just rent money and just taking care of the kids. So that's a bummer. In regards to family members dying of any diseases, probably like most people, but again, nothing that I can actually say that is tragic to, I guess, them not having healthcare. It's just more or less for the sake for the fact that they actually just had a disease and they just died, which is really unfortunate, obviously. But nothing really tragic I can really talk about. The only thing that I would say the most tragic thing that happened to me is COVID-19. And what ultimately, I guess, would segue into why I actually started the march. I always tell the story all the time. What inspired me and what pushed me to get into activism and organizing and wanted to, do a march is when, again, Bernie Sanders said, now it wasn't time for Medicare for All. Like most people, Bernie was that guy. We said, okay, this is our president. So that was a huge letdown for me. But like most people, I stayed at home, social distance, wear a mask, hand sanitizer. But then when Forced to Vote happened, I said, okay, well, this is the play. Maybe this is what Bernie was signaling. We always hear backroom deals with politicians. There's always something at play. So maybe this is what he was talking about. And then when Forced to Vote didn't happen, I said, okay, let me be proactive, because eventually I wanted to do something. I wanted to get out there. I want to get out in the street. We've just had the George Floyd protests throughout the whole summer. I've gone to those. I've gone to protests, but I've never organized a protest. I have no idea how to get started because I'm still new at this. So I joined the Forced to Vote Slack. I joined the People's Party Slack. I joined the Our Revolution, Sunrise Movement. So a lot of different organizers, a lot of different organizations. The Green Party, I've joined a lot of different groups, joined their Slack page, joined their emailing list, reached out to different people. So what are we doing? What's going on? Forced to Vote didn't happen. We're in a pandemic. How are we going to get people health care? Because I live in Jackson Heights. And so in New York, that's the hardest hit area for COVID. And so we lost a lot of people. And just seeing that many deaths just really affects someone. We can't go back from that. So the very first person that I connect with was Ricky Dunlop, who's actually part of our coalition, who was also Forced to Vote. So he and I connected. We also joined the People's Party in New York. And then also we met Renee Johnson. So we started just linking with different people and organizing and to find out what's going on, what's going to happen. Because I mentioned to Ricky, I was like, we need to do a march. And this is when we was actually protesting AOC's office, because we was one of the advocates asking Forced to Vote. We want you to pledge the fact that you will hold a full vote against Nancy Pelosi for healthcare. So that was us. We was doing that. And then I was like, we got to go back to DC when that happened. When we lost that vote. I wanted to go to DC the first time, so that was another reason too that kind of paddled with me. I wanted to go back to DC because that energy was electrifying. We had people in the street really pushing politicians to really do something and say something. So I didn't get any answer from any of the groups that I was part of. No one answered the call, so I was like, "Fuck it, we're gonna do our own march." So I talked to Ricky. I was part of the People's Party Slack. This is where I met Edie. Because I joined when I was part of People, so they have different chapters throughout the country. So I was jumping into everyone's chapter. Okay, what are you doing? 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 So I was just reaching out to people, nagging them. Okay, who's doing a march? Who's doing something? What are we gonna do? So Edie liked the idea, because she thought it was interesting the fact that I didn't even was in New York and I joined her chapter just to get information. That's what I was doing. I was just snooping, taking notes, joining people's meetings, taking notes. Okay, I like this. I'm gonna write this down. Okay, this is cool because I'm still learning. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So I was like, we're gonna do a march. Let me just do some reconnaissance, be nosy, and snoop around. And so we started with 5, and then we had 1 march, and then by April it was by 3 marches. And honestly speaking, there's about 4 or 5 big milestones for the movement. The first one is when Laura jumped into the movement. The second one is when Savage Joy jumped in the movement. The third one is when Joy Bunton joined the movement. And the last one is when Betty joined the movement. And the reason why I say that, and it's good that you have all these women on the panel, is because each one of these women actually have something to help push the needle. And that's just not discredit anyone else's involvement. Minus Joy here, Savage Joy. But those 5 women really helped really push this where it is. Really did. And, I take a lot of pride to say that I'm working with an incredible amount of women.
So when somebody on my page who is a respected activist who has been on my show, and I'm not going to name his name here because I don't want to be calling out people, said that Force the Vote and the People's Party is behind this march, that wouldn't be really accurate, would it? Just because you all have connections to those separate movements.
No, it's not. It's not to play word salad or have wiggle words with have wiggle room with this. A lot of people from Force the Vote are in our movement. A lot of people in People's Party are in the movement. A lot of people are our revolution. So that wouldn't be completely wrong, but also too at the same time to say the national is a part of it is not true. A lot of these members wanted to do something. They just wanted to be. There's volunteers, as I said, they want to be involved. They want to be engaged. So they're not wrong in a sense that. Those members are involved. They're not wrong in that. But to say that the Force the Vote the lead organizer of Force the Vote or lead organizer for People's Party are organizing these marches, that's inaccurate. That's completely inaccurate. But the volunteers are definitely with us, for sure. I mean, Edie is a People's Party member. Joni's a People's Party member. We have a lot of people from Our Revolution. Laura's from Whole Washington. I'm pretty sure Joy Bunton has an organization she's probably linked to. So again, this is all grassroots. So we're all working together to do these marches. So we're not bogged down by a particular organization. So anyone can participate.
And you have, if you go to your website, you'll see a whole page of who the endorsers are, who are part of the coalition. You've got Progressive Democrats of America in there. You've got DSA chapters. You've got Green Party chapters. I mean, this is very, very widespread. I mean, I really feel you guys are to be commended for what you did. I told you, Sharif, when we spoke on the phone, that I tried to do this during Occupy. I had an idea called Occupy Congress, and our issue was getting a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, because we thought that money in politics, if we couldn't get rid of the outsized interest of money in politics, we couldn't accomplish any of our goals in Occupy. But we didn't want to get people to go to DC because, it was too hard and expensive to get people to go to DC. So the idea was we were going to get people to occupy on one day the district offices of their congresspeople in their own communities. And we had all the Occupy people talked with Maestro call. We didn't have Zoom then or Slack or any of those things. We had a conference call system. And I remember we had a working group for this action, and it was me, Occupy Asheville, which is coincidental because that's where I live now, Occupy Denver, Occupy Wall Street, a couple of others. There were 7 Occupies. and we were really working on this completely decentralized, organically, no money, no institutional support. And then some Yahoo with a Facebook page decided he was going to post an action called Occupy Congress. And everybody was supposed to go to DC in January, which was the coldest month of the year down there, when Congress wasn't even in session. And all the air got sucked out of what we were doing, and everybody like glommed onto this. And of course, it didn't happen. It wasn't a very big event. But so I feel for you, you know, what's involved with doing something like this. And I'm kind of watching as these main national organizations are not supporting, but like they are locally, you know, and that's what I like. I like when an organization is bottom up rather than top down, and the local chapters have the autonomy. So I want to talk about the individual marches now, give each of you a chance to talk about your individual march. Betty, why don't you talk about Los Angeles, talk about how you went about getting the speakers, getting the endorsers, and now how you're trying to get attendees.
Okay, great. So Edie actually and Joni and some other wonderful, Elizabeth and Dan and Carlos and Michelle and all of these wonderful people are organizing together. I cannot take full credit for everything that's happening in Los Angeles. So I want to mention their names. And I want to thank Cherie for, I appreciate that shout out. One times when you're like really working hard, you don't see your accomplishments, you know, you just your nose is to the grind, you know, and you don't see what's happening. So I appreciate that you gave me that little shout out. Yeah, so basically starting from what you know and who you know and reaching out to different organizations to see if they will come on as endorsers. I made it in particular a specific ask, which was not only lend us your logos, but please, you know, mobilize your groups. You know, get out the word. You know, follow us on social media. Mobilize people to show up. So we have several different organizations, and one particular organization just came on board on Tuesday, which was a supporting organization of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. And actually, Mark Gonzalez gave us a uplifting plug at the county committee meeting on Tuesday, which was a great surprise to me in respects that, you know, everything's been happening so fast, and he was able to keep up and do that for us. We have PDA California. We have, of course, my organization, Healthcare for All Los Angeles, that is supporting. We have Indivisible State Strong, which is a wonderful organization in California that works on state legislation primarily. And they gave us our endorsement because their priority bill is AB 1400. We have so all these people are on board, lending us their logos, mobilizing their membership, and I believe they're going to have a really good turnout. Other outreaches we usually do, we do on social media. And yes, I think that many of us here on this call have been trying to get on any show that we can and to talk about the marches and keep that energy alive. I was just on Boots on the Ground with Carlos Mariquin this morning. Thank you, Lauren, for having us on tonight. You know, like, don't tell me what bill, what this, what that, how are you going to fund it? We are going to get it, and you're going to do it, because we are here in the street, and we are making it, we're demonstrating, we're putting our bodies out there, and we want you to figure it out, because that's why we actually, you know, voted for you, is to do that. And in California, we are going to uplift the champions in our legislature and try to give them as much support as they can, and also educate the public about the bill, because a lot of times people just don't know. You know, California is a huge state, 39 million people, and to get the word out about a bill is not that easy. So we're hoping to elevate an education for the CalCare bill as well.
And you're also having, I understand the last time we spoke, 2 out of the 3 main co-authors of that bill speaking at the LA March.
Yeah, Ash Kalra, who is very progressive assembly person in California, and local Miguel Santiago and LA, and actually up in San Francisco, Alex Lee will be speaking at the San Francisco March. These are the three principal co-authors of the bill. Ash Kalra being the main introducer of that bill into our state legislature.
And let's deal with one of these controversies before I leave you, Betty, and that is Tara Reid. When I say controversy, I'm talking about Twitter controversy. There's a lot of people wanting to know what Tara Reid has to do with the Medicare for All issue and why she's speaking at the LA March. Your response.
Okay, well, you know, the thing about Tara Reid speaking at our march, I mean, I think it just goes to show you that we're not just one faction or group demanding. There are a lot of people. This is a melting pot of people of all walks of life that are gathering together to help organize these marches at a grassroots, lift from the bottom effort, not from top down, not from any particular one organization. And Tara speaks to something that people don't think about when it comes to Medicare for All, which is the intersectionality of the issue. It can be Medicare for All, single payer, AB 1400, CalCare, whole Washington's initiatives and bills. These are actually can be very curative to many of the issues that we face today. Especially when it comes to people who have been abused, sexually and physically abused, who would just be able to freely get the care and to have that mindset, the care that they need mentally and physically. And I think that Tara has a story that she can tell in relation to the needs that she experienced and how a Medicare for All system can be curative to that. So very intersectional issue, Medicare for All is. So, she will be coming to the LA March to speak. I'm actually hoping that she comes. I'm pretty sure she is right now. She's on our speaker list.
Joy, why don't you talk about your Chicago March?
We have PNHP Illinois and PDA Illinois, Dr. Pam Gronemeyer. She's going to be speaking. I'm very excited about that.
For people that don't understand the initials, that PNHP stands for Physicians for a National Health Program. And PDA, which I mentioned before, stands for Progressive Democrats of America.
Yes, and we also have National Nurses United Medicare Leadership graduate Martise Chisholm. And she had, I learned about her. She spoke at the Bernie rally we had in Chicago when he was here, like for the 2020, and I was like, who is that? Martise Chisholm. And when we were trying to decide who we might get to speak, Kathy Powers, she's very active. She had suggested Martise Chisholm. I was like, oh, okay, I will reach out to Martise Chisholm. And so I was so glad she agreed to speak. We also have Jamal Green, who was a Bernie, you're probably familiar with him, he's a Bernie surrogate. And he's very active here in Chicago and pushing back against the mayor and shutting down local Chase branches. And I knew I wanted him to speak, and I was so excited when he said yes. And we also have disabilities activist Curtis Harris, who's recommended to me. I wasn't familiar with him before. And he has autism, and he's with the Chicagoland Autism Connection, I think is the name of it, and with the Illinois Disabilities Council of Developmental Disabilities as well. He's very active in that area. And we have Junaid Ahmed, who is running in the 8th District of Illinois against Raja Ratnamurthy, who does not support Medicare for All, which is not cool. So we were glad to have him on board. I may be speaking, actually, which has not been announced. I submitted the form. We have a form that we have everyone fill out, and I was encouraged to speak, so I may be speaking. It just isn't official yet. And in terms of performers, we have the late, great Oscar Brown Jr.'s Maggie Brown. Oscar Brown Jr. is well known in the jazz community, and he was well loved in Chicago. And so I was very glad when she agreed to to perform. So I was like, yay, thank you. We're going to be marching from across the Blue Cross Blue Shield building. It's downtown. We're going to be downtown. It's at the Maggie Daley Park, which is named after the second Daley's wife. And we're going to be marching from there through down to Federal Plaza. Because I think that symbolically that's apropos, because neither one of my senators supports Medicare for All. They don't pretend. They're not faking it. They just don't. They don't support anything that Bernie puts out there. Senator, they're like, oh, Bernie put something out. Okay. The only thing they supported was the $15. That was it. Otherwise, they just pretend he doesn't exist, pretty much. So that's the thing behind that. Yes.
Great. Well, I see so many legitimate people, prestigious people are speaking at these marches. It's just beyond me that we have naysayers out there that really don't know what they're talking about. And there's 50 of these marches, right, Sharif? About 50?
There's 51 actually, and believe it or not, before I actually joined the Zoom meeting, there's someone who reached out to me to sort of do a St. Louis march. I haven't got back to that person yet, so there might be 52. So I'm going to see. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So now we go to Laura. You want to talk about your march in Seattle, right?
Because I think this really speaks to the coalition building that does happen whenever there's a lot of state organizing. Because I see little old whole Washington. It's like the second row down in the middle of all of these wonderful orgs. So we have Green Party Seattle, Green Party of Washington, PNHP Western Washington, People's Party of Washington, Seattle DSA, Sunrise Movement Seattle. Let's see, what does that stand for? Showing Up for Racial Justice, Lower Columbia, Black Panther Party, Healthcare is a Human Right, Backbone Campaign, Red Berets, and Our Revolution Washington. So yeah, we very much, when Sharif reached out and said, you want to organize something in Washington State, I knew that Seattle was the best. There are reasons why I would love to have organized in Tacoma, but I think Seattle kind of spoke to me for a lot of reasons. I don't need to go into all of those, but yeah, and Andre Stackhouse had recently done a really awesome event for us that I also had reached out to ask him if he wanted to do, and that was when Dr. Victoria Dooley and Justin Jackson came on to be panelists on a live showing that Whole Washington hosted, which was Power to Heal. And that's such an important documentary or film that I really recommend people who haven't seen Power to Heal do that. But anyway, that was the reason that I reached out to Andre Stackhouse, who is the lead Seattle organizer, is because I really wanted him to, I very much did not want it to be the whole Washington march, Seattle March for Medicare for All, where I believe, and many, many, many people believe, that the initiative is very, very important, but we wanted everybody to have a seat at the table. Even those people that aren't necessarily, we of course hope they will support the initiative, but wherever they stand, it's the March for Medicare for All. So that's why I knew that Andre would be, in addition to a lot of skill sets that he has, such an amazing organizer, and so he's doing an awesome job. And I want, if people are curious, if we reached out to Representative Jayapal, yes, we did. We got, I think it's been several weeks back now, official word that from her campaign that she was unavailable to attend the march, but she was reached out to, so she won't be attending. But of course, everyone has probably seen that Council Member Shama Sawant will be the keynote speaker. Also, Nikita Oliver, who is a local artist and activist in Seattle. We're really excited about that. And then the other thing I want to say, I want to give a shout out to Olympia because they came aboard. I can't give you a lot of details for what's happening. It's more of a solidarity event, but some amazing people down there in Olympia. So that's awesome that they've come aboard to do a second event. But I want to say we're also we have congressional candidates, Jason Call, who does sit on the board of Whole Washington, and Rebecca Parson, who is running again to challenge Representative Kilmer here in my district, Congressional District 6. Oh my gosh, I always forget the third congressional candidate. So see, I think a lot of people hear about Washington State, and just like with California, they think, oh, they're so progressive out there. But there's only one co-sponsor of Representative Jayapal's bill, and that's Adam Smith. And he, again, is someone that we have a lot of reason to think that he would not be somebody who would vote for the legislation. In fact, well, anyway, I'm getting too much into the weeds on that, but we really want to, the candidates who are running on Medicare for All have all endorsed Whole Washington and are kind of, they're just coalition organizers. They're working on all fronts on this strategy. So, you know, of course, it's great to have them on the platform. We don't have Representative Jayapal's support or endorsement. And I think maybe prior to all these marches, people might have thought, I mean, for Whole Washington, nor for the March for Medicare for All, obviously. Prior to all this, people might have thought, well, you won't get her endorsement for a state effort. Her purview is federal legislation. She's the prime sponsor of Medicare for All. So she won't. But the thing about it is, like, here's this custom built platform. It would be wonderful if she came out to support, but we really have been asking for, you know, at least a signature or a tweet of solidarity for Whole Washington for years now. And it might be unpopular for me to kind of just speak plainly and clearly that hasn't happened despite quite an enormous amount of pressure. This is one of the reasons why I feel so adamantly about pressing forward with Whole Washington, is because we really have tried. We did 11 barnstorms, Whole Washington did, when Rep. Jayapal introduced her bill in 2019, alongside National Nurses United all across the state. And recently we did a protest outside of Representative Kilber's office that documentarian Kenny Valentine came to film, and he'll also be filming the marches in 3 of the major cities. So, you know, it's just a matter of, like, we've been really trying to fight on all fronts here, and we would love, if she doesn't want to endorse Whole Washington, I guess that we would love to have her signature as a resident of Washington State. But there's the March for Medicare for All, you see, and we have nothing on that yet. And I would still love it if she would, but we aren't hearing anything from the Progressive Caucus. And so this is why, for me, it's literally sort of a fight on all fronts, and we're just doing everything we can towards it.
What is the march that you're organizing? Are you organizing a march actually in New York City, or are you organizing the one in DC?
I'm organizing one in DC.
So is there a march in New York City?
There is, yeah. It's going to be pretty big, actually.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so do you want to talk about the DC march? Who's going to be speaking there? Who the endorsers are?
We have Marianne Williamson. She's going to be the keynote speaker. Savage Joy is going to be the MC speaker. We're going to have Scott Denoyers, who's also going to be a speaker. He's also going to do a visual, which I'm really excited about. We also have Lee Camp, Dr. Joe Jarvis, and Reverend Annie Chambers from the Poor People's Campaign and from the Black Panthers, also going to be speaking as well. And we're going to have Laura Felding from the Red Berets, which I'm really excited about. Laura was actually my first choice to be a speaker in DC when I reached out to her to be involved in the March for Medicare for All in DC. My first goal was to have her as a speaker. And Laura wasn't too sure yet because she's super busy with organizing, with all the things that's going on in whole Washington. So she was going back and forth whether or not she was going to do it or not. But then ultimately, I think me nagging her so much, she agreed to be a speaker in DC, which I'm super excited about. Also, what we're going to have in the DC March, we're going to have Andrew D'Angelo. He's a saxophone player. He's going to be at the DC March performing. We have a DJ, DJ John Murph, who's going to be performing. We have a guitar player. I forgot the gentleman's name because Savage Joy actually booked that guitar player. So that's going to be awesome as well. We're going to have a march. We're going to have a rally. We're going to have speakers throughout the whole event. It's going to be from 11 to 5, and I'm really excited about that.
Well, I mean, all of this sounds so tremendous. I do feel compelled to address some of these controversies because I said that I would. So first of all, Sharif, I want to ask you about the money. You guys are raising money. How much money have you raised? I know that ADA organization is the fiscal sponsor. How much have you raised and how have you spent it? And is there any place people could see this, maybe on your website or somewhere?
I'm not really sure exactly where we are at in numbers. We'll probably have a better idea tomorrow morning after the weekend and after these final pushes. But I can tell you right now, we can always use some donations because there's always things that we have to pay for, including the unsexy porta potties and things like that. So, but I have to give a shout out to ADA. Tremendous has given us, I feel like, the infrastructure to do the fundraising, because any skepticism that could have taken place where this is just a, ragtag group of people and they're taking money in now, they really stepped up to the plate and said, these people are trying to do some good work and let's support them and give them the infrastructure to do their fundraising. And we are able to be transparent and do it underneath a 501c3.
So will there be a page on the website at some point to show how much money came in and where that money was spent on?
Yes, I believe that we're going to do full transparency. It's just that right now, I'll just tell you right now, we are all very, very busy. So if that doesn't come out exactly at the time that everyone expects it to, it's because we are grassroots volunteer organizers. And I just want to remind everybody here is a volunteer.
Yeah.
Nobody is getting paid for this. So when you want something like turn around on the dime like that, it's not going to exactly happen right away. We hope that we can be like that, but we will be transparent. And that was our goal and is our goal to be transparent.
Full disclosure, so the DC March is $7,000. And that came from 3 people: myself, Savage Joy, and Ricky Dunlop. So we really haven't. I canceled my vacation in August because I was gonna go to Seattle and see Laura Felding and the Red Berets and whole Washington because I wanted to see our first partners. So it was kind of like my bucket list, and so I have to cancel that because I don't have any money. I got to take care of rent and take care of kids. So so I'm raising money to see if I can actually get some of the money back that we actually put into the march because we believe in it.
Other controversies. Muncie. Apparently, this was a catfish operation, but for the longest time, people thought that there was a neo-Nazi as one of the keynote speakers at the march in Muncie. And apparently there wasn't even a Muncie march. Who wants to talk about that?
All the marches get verified. So we all talk about, so for example, the person who just emailed me about a St. Louis march, I'll bring it up to the other organizers and let them know, oh, someone wants to do a march. So we all kind of get it. We all know who's going to do something. They may not know the organizer or the group, but we definitely are aware of what's going on. So we didn't even know anything about this. So it was very shocking to us to hear that there's no march. We didn't hear about this. What's going on with that? So that was a red flag automatically.
I mean, the guy from Muncie, apparently, the neo-Nazi apparently didn't hear about this either.
Which was the best thing that ever happened to us because that just verified that we had nothing to do with this.
Yeah, right. Really did. I just want to point something out because the criticism is we didn't have all of this security, high-tech security to stop this from happening and all this and that. And really, dude, they got a graphic. Okay, they didn't. Right. They did not have a march. They did not have any organizer information. They weren't disclosed any of those things. Okay, all they did was get a graphic from an overworked volunteer to volunteer graphic people, and that's all they get. And I want to just talk about Sharif, where he said he wanted to get out there and organize. So he kind of went into all these Slacks and started to talk to people. So now when people talk about security, we were working on the Slack platform, okay? And anybody can really say, okay, I want to join your efforts and come onto a Slack. We were, okay, bad on us, we're fools, we were catfished, blah, 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 that's about it. Nothing wrong with any talk of security or anybody's information or any kind of money or anything like that. There was nothing it's ridiculous that we got eaten so badly and our time taken up by that.
Yeah.
I really feel like because of that, what happened, because we were so diligent in addressing the situation and taking ourselves into a place where we can be a little bit more secure and be a little bit more diligent about the people that were entering our workspaces and things like that, that the people that perpetuated this, even from the left, really were feeding into our opposition.
They know that the left is very triggered. They know that was very strategic on purpose. Obviously, they didn't just pick anybody. They picked a certain person to catfish the left, not just catfish us, but catfish the left, because they know that, neo-Nazis working with the marchers. Okay, don't touch that. And then so now people stop working, and even now because of that, you have some people who are still not working with us, who still don't want to volunteer with us because of the incident, even though the incident has been dead and buried.
I only know their Twitter handles, but apparently Comrade Misty is going to be an MC of a march, and she was criticized for being on a show with a known Holocaust denier, supposedly, and Unholy Rome, who is, I don't know if he's a speaker or an organizer, made some remarks, and I actually saw these remarks, so I heard it with my own ears and saw it with my own eyes, basically saying that he doesn't believe that lesbians exist. They're just women who haven't found the right dick yet. And I'm paraphrasing here. So the question is, associating with such unprofessional, do you want such unprofessional people representing your march? Anyone want to answer that?
Sure, I don't mind.
Go ahead.
I would say yes, I do actually. I don't have a problem. I'm just being honest. Roman's apologized for a lot of the things that's actually come out of his mouth, and he does a lot of good activism. He does a lot of good organizing for his community, and I love his energy. I love his passion. So when I reached out to him to be an MC for the Detroit March, I felt like he was a perfect person to actually speak to that. In regards to Misty, being on a show with a Holocaust denier, I have to know a little bit more information about that. Just knowing Misty personally now, organizing with her being an MC for the Ohio March, I can't imagine her denying the Holocaust. Just knowing her personally now, so I don't even know if I can even really speak to that. I highly, highly, highly doubt if she said anything negative in that regard. But her being on a show with someone, being interviewed by someone, or even being on a panel with someone who's a Holocaust denier doesn't speak to where she is in that regard. I wouldn't even connect to that. I think that's an overreach. So I wouldn't even speak to that. But the Rome comment, I think that has more validity. It has more weight due to the fact that we all know Rome, who know him on Twitter, to know his troubled past. And I think he should be forgiven for that. He's apologized for that, and I think he's a better person for that. I think for acknowledging that he was wrong by saying that.
Well, I hope that Jimmy Dore fans who are watching this show will agree with that philosophy and extend the same courtesy to Cenk and Anna, at least for their original way that they were doing TYT to be like the Howard Stern show, because there were a lot of videos made of their remarks. And it's funny because the person who brought this up and is the same person who Laura did this meme about, which I want to get into, I was talking with on direct message. And when I brought this up to him, he was saying, oh, these aren't serious people. And I said, well, I guess you would have to say that Cenk and Anna are not serious people. And then I shared that video with him and he got all upset about it.
So further that comment, I mean, we as Americans, not me, but Americans, we voted for a rapist, a racist, and a war criminal as president.
Yes, we did.
I mean, if we're okay with that, then we should be okay with Rome being MC speaker.
Well, and then this led into this person who I said was on my show, who was commenting on my page today, who then said this march is aligned with the Red Brown Alliance, which is that whole Jimmy platforming the Boogaloo Boys and the idea that, we could ever align with fascists. And I really feel like that is so guilt by association that it's not even funny. And really, what I said to this person, who's a lot more legitimate than the person that Laura and I were fighting about on Twitter. I said, this is a decentralized march organized by average citizens. Sharif, you remind me of, I had Chris Smalls on my show a year ago, and he was just an ordinary person until COVID started. And then he was an Amazon warehouse worker, and he saw that Amazon was not doing anything to protect its workers against COVID. And he organized a walkout, and he got fired, and the thing snowballed. And the next thing you know, he organized the Congress of Essential Workers, and now he's a major organizer. Not everybody goes to organizing school here. I happen to have taken a class, Marshall Ganz's class. It was called Leadership, Organizing, and Action. So I did have a semester's training in it. But most people do this because they're pissed off about something, because they're passionate about something, because they can't not do it. And I was telling this person, I'm sorry that we don't have professional spokespeople who, have communications training and PR training and marketing training and know exactly the right things to say. But, many of these people are marginalized people who feel like they voted for these candidates. And this is what I wanted to ask you. This person also said, he said, when I talked to Sharif, he said the real reason for doing these marches was to call out the corporate duopoly and call out AOC and people like her as frauds. And I said, well, look, I said to him, as you know, I Dem exited in 2017. I call out the corporate duopoly, but I've been organizing for Medicare For All since 2004. Does that make me a not serious person? So I think that people have to understand that, we are pissed off. We're pissed off because we don't have health care, or even those of us who have to have health care, have health insurance like I do, paying $600 a month with a $5,000 deductible, which really means I'm just paying for catastrophic insurance, and everything any kind of health care I need, I have to pay for out of pocket. But I can afford it. This person that I was arguing with can afford it. Most people that are going to be marching in the streets cannot afford it, and they deserve to be pissed. So I wanted to just kind of segue with you, Sharif, into this feeling about, it's even in your Twitter handle, fuck AOC. So let's talk about that a little bit, because it does look like that our politicians, Bernie and Pramila and AOC and the like, have backed away from Medicare for All. I think I can explain why that is, and I want to have a chance to do that, but I want to hear everybody on this panel's feeling about that. Just your gut feeling to see these people who were such champions now back away. I mean, even Nina, I know there's going to be a march in Columbus, and Nina is going to be with AOC that day. So it seems to me, I would want her to come if I were organizing that march. I would want AOC to be there, just like I would want Pramila to be in Seattle and Bernie to be wherever he's going to be, maybe Washington, D.C., but they're not, and they've backed away from it. So I'd like everybody's thoughts on that right now.
I'm a bit different from some of the others. I wasn't a forced to vote person, and I personally didn't participate with the targeting of the squad, but I understand that some things tick people off differently than others. I've been mad about politics since 2000. So it's like since 2000 with Gore versus Bush, and looking at the chads and the Florida being called and Jeb Bush, I've been mad about politics since then. So my mom taught me about picking your battles and that people will disappoint you. So I was very disappointed in 2016 after what happened with Bernie. And so I was preparing myself for 2020 in advance, because that was so difficult to process with 2016. I was like, this is probably what's going to happen, because I get analytical. And so I personally didn't because with the forcible, but there are forcible people involved in the march. And so we just agree to disagree. I can't say we get along like best friends all the time, but I respect them. Sometimes I will see something on Twitter and I'll be like, oh, why'd they say that? But they're them. I'm me. They're two things, how they're going to do. And I, like Sharif is upset about AOC. Okay, I'm in Illinois, so it's like if I am going to be mad at someone in another district, I can't vote them out.
But I'm asking specifically, and not about force the vote, but how do you feel about the fact that Pramila and Bernie have backed off? Bernie hasn't even introduced. I mean, we're now in almost the end of July, and he hasn't reintroduced his Medicare for All bill, and he's trying to get lower the age of eligibility to 60, dental, vision, and hearing into the reconciliation bill, as opposed to Medicare for All. Just what's your gut reaction to that?
I'm not a big fan of incrementalism. It's not something that I agree with. I'm for bold policy and pushing it through and getting it done. But I think Bernie was considered, what was his name before he ran, the Amendment King or something like that, right? Yeah. So this is how Bernie has learned to live within the system and work within the system to get the things that he feels that he needs to get through done. That's how he's operated. Okay, so that's something that he's used to doing. So this is what he probably is continuing to do in the environment that he is now. This is not a bad thing to do. We need these things for these people. We need way more. We need way more. So when you talk about this kind of incrementalism, the Amendment King, and this way of doing things, the thing is that I think that they should look a little bit beyond, meaning they, the progressives, should look a little beyond and look a little bit more into that, because, the force the vote could have been a moment of this type of Amendment King type thing, a strategy to actually get bold initiative passed, or at least a huge spotlight on it, especially in the middle of a pandemic. Okay, so as they use these these kind of strategies to get things done little by little, well then try to find these other little strategies where you can get bigger things done. But it's not a surprise to me, because that's what he's done in the past.
Laura, your thoughts?
I would highly recommend that everybody go and read that Counterpunch article. I think it's very, very important that we push the Progressive Caucus very, very hard, because strategically, as is laid out in the article, I think it's a very big mistake. It's a tactical mistake for them to not come out and show some bit of solidarity where they have all of this behind. Because, and I know they're not aiming for Medicare for All, we see that, they're not going to get the age of eligibility lowered by 5 years. They're not even going to get that. But with this amount of being in 51, 52 maybe cities across the country, and if we could get just, an appearance, a tweet of solidarity, a little bit of help pushing this, even just thanking us for, my gosh, this is such an important issue. It's been something that I have championed. Thank you for everybody who's, doing this. I know that makes a really strong statement, but just kind of tapping into the power of the grassroots, like it says in that article, this could have been this is a custom built platform for them all to stand on with this, with these marches, and it very well could have at least the power to press to make sure that we get the age of eligibility lowered. Biden's not going to give that away, and in fact, it'll be whittled down to nothing. It'll probably be whittled down to make sure that we can't even get the expanded hearing and dental and vision. I don't know where we stand with that, but these marches could be used to at least leverage to get enough power to get some of that done. And I don't want to go into the meme and all that stuff, but to give you just a little bit of background, that came out very much from when I knit a hat for Ryan Knight. I am very much for this inside out approach. We're getting all these endorsements for whole Washington that this wonderful person is tweeting out, asking for endorsements of candidates from all over the country, which is really amazing. So it's kind of like I've crafted, and other crafters have crafted for Green Party candidates, for Democratic Socialists, we've really just tried to knit and crochet for everybody, and in the best way we know possible, unite the movement. We got a big sort of splash when the DSA fund vice chair, David Duhalde. I don't know what is Duhalde. I don't know. He came and thought that it would be a fun idea to tweet out making fun of Ryan Knight. And why that's kind of offensive is that hat was that's an amazing piece, by the way, for people that don't know knitting. It was an incredible piece of activism. And whether people like Ryan Knight or like the fact that he is completely going full bore at both major parties, that let's face it, neither one of the parties have Medicare for All on their platform. Let's remember that first and foremost. Medicare for All is not on the Democratic Party platform. And I just think that's something that we have to keep reminding ourselves. What I was saying about candidates is I am very, very thankful to get these candidates' endorsements for Whole Washington and to help lift them up. I believe that we need to do this on all fronts. We have to replace incumbents with Democrats, Green Party, whatever, independent. I think we need a coalition government. At the same time, I've Dem-exited, and so I really have amplified Ryan Knight. And if that's divisive, I really just feel that it's telling the truth. Both major parties are owned by Big Pharma and the insurance companies. And if you have time to make fun of crafters who are knitting, because by the way, I am a serious person. We're actually crafting and donating our work to Whole Washington. I would love it if our nurses organization was as progressive as the National Nurses United. They are not. So we don't have a National Nurses United up here to support Whole Washington. We're literally knitting and crocheting to raise money for our ballot initiative. And so every time somebody buys a red beret, it helps us to print petitions. I would be happy to mobilize crafters to help candidates and to help people in other initiatives. And even as I get the word out, to help with March for Medicare for All in their future efforts.
I didn't know about this particular tweet. I thought you were talking about the one that you and I got into an exchange with, where you did that meme of Jeff Miami.
I never had a problem with Jeff Miami until Beretgate. That's when he first started interacting with me. I usually just kind of stick to let me retweet a bunch of berets and stuff on I don't get into all of the Twitter stuff. I'm retweeting Whole Washington. I'm trying to retweet other organizations and try to stick a little bit onto the Medicare for All platform. But yeah, it was during that whole thing. That's when Jeff started coming more into my sphere and, joining in the sort of undermining of the hats. And so the meme wasn't made by me, but it was just he's really been, maybe doxing is a strong word. He's really been attacking and undermining a lot of people. And maybe Sharif is a better person to speak to that. My experience with him was relatively new. It was coming from Beretgate, as I like to call it. But other people have been dealing with smears, and I don't appreciate not being called, being called not a serious activist. Over 300 berets for healthcare justice, for a former president of PNHP, for Nina Turner, for Dr. Dooley, for Bernie, for independent media. I'd be happy to knit you one, Lauren, when I can get.
I certainly want that more than a pink pussy hat. I'll tell you, I was at that Women's March and I was kind of trolling the Women's March while it was happening. But I really went down there for Occupy inauguration. Yeah. But no, what happened with us was that you did this meme, and it was frustrating to me because I thought it was rather funny. It used the Medicare for All logo and the same graphic design. And what happened to me was I was trying to convince the North Carolina Medicare for All Coalition to do a march, for us to sponsor a march in the Capitol. And one of our members saw this thing, and I had just gotten finished explaining how the Muncie thing was a catfish operation. When all of a sudden this thing comes out, and she puts it out to the whole Google group that, these people, I don't know how serious this is because these people get in these Twitter fights. So I reply to you, oh, great. Just when I got the North Carolina Medicare for All Coalition to consider being involved, you have to do this. I hope your own of Jeff Miami was worth it. Yes. Now, we argued back and forth for 2 hours. And there were people that kept coming in and siding with my position and people siding with your position. But by the end of it, and I don't know who made the first move, but I basically apologized to you for not, addressing you by direct message, because it was embarrassing for me to call you out like that. And then you responded that you were sorry, maybe you shouldn't have shared the graphic.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, we were apologizing to each other. And then we talking on Facebook, and I invited you on the show.
Yeah.
And my comment on Twitter was, if Cenk and Jimmy and Anna and Kyle could all talk directly, with a little communication, self-reflection, humility, and the ability to apologize, maybe we wouldn't be having this leftist infighting. Or maybe we would, because it's like worldwide wrestling, and that's how people get views and clicks and everything like that. I just wanted to mention that I'm of both minds with what Bernie and Pramila did, because I too think, and I know that Margaret Flowers would agree with me, I shared recently an interview that I did of her and her partner, the late great activist Kevin Zeese, at the Florida Medicare For All Summit back in 2018 that I attended. And I was talking to her about the state single payer bill, because we had one back then. And she was giving a lot of very good reasons, which we're not going to get into tonight, you guys, as to why she thought it wasn't going to work and it was incremental. We should only go for what we really want, which is new and improved Medicare for all on a national basis. And I was trying to make the point about, well, what politicians do and what they think they can get. And her point was, that's not the job of the movement. The movement is to ask for what we want. Let the politicians do the compromising. So I will say, though, that, in this, semester-long class I took, Leadership, Organizing, and Action, there is the philosophy that you can use incremental wins to boost morale and grow the movement. So I think Bernie's thinking that if we get more people covered and more people have these benefits, we're going to create more of a constituency that supports Medicare for all, who is then going to lobby their representatives to get the whole enchilada. So I see it both ways. I see it from the politician's point of view and the movement's point of view. Now I just want to close by talking about the next steps for the movement that you've started based on these marches. You sent me just yesterday a petition, Sharif, that you've started with demands. And if the demands aren't met by a certain date, you're going to file a complaint with the UN a human rights violation. Please talk about the demands, this complaint, and how you are organizing. Because Joy was telling me you guys now have a steering committee. She's on it. Let's talk about that to end the show.
The first demand is that we want a single payer healthcare system. That's number one. And again, like I said, we go through the petition, we'll go into details of what that means. The second one, we want in writing that healthcare is a human right. And the third and lastly is that we want federal spending for healthcare to be put first. So whatever, so when we, and so again, it goes into detail on the petition sheet. But those are the three demands. And again, those three demands are not met. If we don't hear it back from anyone from our federal government, I will be filing a complaint for a human rights complaint against us not having healthcare. I mean, we're still in COVID. COVID's still here. We have the COVID variant still propping up. Joe Biden wants everyone to get vaccinated, and we're not taking Medicare for all very seriously. So I think that's an issue. As far as what's next, we're not sure if the filing a complaint is going to make a bit of a difference, but we do want to know. We do want to keep the movement going. So by not having a march, having a rally, and then not doing something after the fact seems kind of pointless to us. So this is why we actually going to file a complaint at the UN. We do have other actions we are going to do further down the year, but we just want to keep the ball rolling and keep applying pressure, because the moment we stop, I don't think we're going to get anything.
And talk about your process, the steering committee, how you're now becoming more organized.
The steering committee is more geared towards for making sure roles are being done. So, for example, us doing a petition, us having a press release, who's going to do social media, how we're going to onboard volunteers, how the finances is going to be done. So that's pretty much where that is. Usually before, everything was kind of done with a conversation. Everything's always done with a conversation, but with the steering committee now, it now is beyond just a conversation. Now we actually put people accountable for certain tasks. So you have to do your certain tasks. So that's really the difference. We still want to keep it decentralized. Everyone still has to have a vote. So, for example, if you, Lauren, you came to a meeting tomorrow, your vote would be just as important as my vote tomorrow. So it wouldn't make a really difference. The only difference between a steering committee and a regular meeting is that now you're tasked with something. You have to do that because you signed up for that. So that's the difference. So my task on the steering committee, I'm a PR spokesperson. So my job and responsibility is to make sure we get on much coverage as possible, and the steering committee members will check. I said, Sharif, you get any platforms? Have you discussed it yet? What have you done? So this is all about keeping the movement accountable, keeping people accountable, keep going, keep moving, having a task, having assignments, but we have so much work to do.
Well, all I would say is, as far as PR goes, you have to really kind of watch your tone. I know, there's that term tone policing, and I've been accused of tone policing, but I'm also a media consultant. And I know that when you give somebody an opening, like Savage Joy, sort of went after Charles Booker, questioning, did he in fact really have a scheduling conflict? That gave Ryan Grimm an opening to come in and talk about that on his show, Rising. And you don't want Ryan Grimm to be talking about your marches like that. And I scolded him for that. I'm going to contact a lot of the other YouTube hosts that have much bigger platforms than I do to try to have you on, because it's, I don't understand why Bree Joy Gray, for instance, I haven't seen any tweets about this march. She does the Bad Faith podcast. She should have you on. I mean, was forced to vote. Was Medicare for All a real serious issue for her, or did it not extend beyond, force the vote? One has to ask these questions.
That's fair, but I would put less emphasis on Bree and more emphasis on the politicians who are not coming out and saying something. So that's just me. We reached out to Jamila Jayapal. We also reached out to Nina Turner. Nina Turner told us long time ago that she's campaigning, so she will not be available. So we definitely did direct contact from her.
We had direct contact from Rep. Jayapal as well.
Right.
He responded directly to Andre.
And what did she say?
Pramila Jayapal?
Yeah.
That she's unavailable to attend on the 24th.
And what about, well, all right, I'll message her, because she was on my show last summer, and I'm going to see what I can do. I donated to her. Any last minute comments from the panel?
Yeah, I would say if you can, small dollar donations does matter. It does really help. So many hands make light work, and those light hands can definitely do a lot if you donate at least $1 or $2 to any of the marches. So please do pick a march you felt that you want to go to, or if you want to just donate to all the marches, please do.
Yes, please make a donation, but we're going to win with numbers. Okay. And those numbers are not necessarily dollars. Those numbers are people and their feet, and they're walking and coming out and rallying and showing that they're, that they're willing to get out there in the elements, because it'll probably be hot here in California, and rally for this issue. We're marching to stay alive. We're marching for our lives. We know that the system is, saves money. It saves lives. And we deserve it, and I think that all of America and California needs to have an affirmation that you are worth it. You are good. These people love you, and we love you when you want your health care. But get out there on July 24th, whatever way you can do it. And then even if you can't, if you're at home and you cannot get out, get to the live streams and start spreading them out all over the place. Go to us on Twitter, spread it out, spread the word if you can't make it. Drop our links and our website, which is M for All.
And I want to say, as somebody who's been organizing for Medicare for All since 2004, you guys really did a tremendous job. I mean, you were able to do this, as I've said several times in this show, with no institutional support, very little politician or elected official support, and yet you were able to pull off 51, maybe even 52 marches. I hope more people will cover this between now and next Saturday when the marches are. But it's been my privilege and honor to have you on the show. And I would love for you to, for the viewers who are watching, if any of you are naysayers, I'm sure you can see the serious nature of these organizers, of these endorsers, of these speakers. And this is going to be great. And you really need to spread this video around, because I think once they watch this show, they're going to realize that any doubts that they might have had will fly right out the window. All right. Thank you, everybody. Good luck next Saturday.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Keep fighting.
Mhm.